Hi everyone, I am Denise Garcia and I have my groupmate here, Sam Medina, and we will be discussing cognitive dissonance theory. But first, let me ask this question. Have you encountered this instance na hindi mo malapitan yung friend mo kasi para siyang bad trip, tapos hindi mo alam paano siya i-approach kasi nga hindi mo siya matansya? We have been through that instance kaya minsan magulo din. These people stated na attitudes are believed to be excellent predictors of people's behavior. It means na you can predict their behavior sa kung paano sila makitungo sa'yo. If their attitude towards you is mataray, then you can now predict their behavior. Because of these, many theories are being made para ma-explain yung attitude formation, changes, and the relationship between cognitions, or yung ways of beliefs, judgments, and thoughts and attitudes, affects, and behavioral tendencies. These theories imply that the mind operates as an intermediary between stimulus and response. Kaya naman kapag nakaka-receive ng certain information ang isang tao, yung mind nila ang nag-organize ng pattern and nire-relate nila sa previous na-encounter na stimuli. And with that, sinasabi ng mga consistency theorists na there is a lack of balance among varying cognitions. Festinger called this feeling of imbalance as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance pertains to the feeling people have when they find themselves doing things that don't fit with what they know or having opinions that do not fit with other opinions they hold. And mula doon na binuo ni Festinger yung cognitive dissonance theory that says that dissonance is an uncomfortable feeling that motivates people to take steps to reduce it. It's like if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed about certain things, kaya yung step na ita-take mo to reduce it is magpahinga or mag-breakdown or mag-unwind. As for Roger Brown, the basics of the theory follow simple principles in which a state of cognitive dissonance is said to be a state of psychological discomfort or tension that motivates efforts to achieve consonance. He also pointed out that the theory allows for two elements to have three different relationships with each other. These three relationships that are being pointed out by Brown are consonant, dissonant, and irrelevant. In consonant relationship, pinapakita nito na equal yung two elements. Like for instance, if gusto maging fit and healthy, you'll start working out and eat healthy. On the other hand, opposite naman yung nangyayari sa dissonant relationship. The two elements are having disequilibrium. One example of this is growing up Catholic, but then you're pro-abortion, so parang nagkakaroon ng conflict between your religion and yung paniniwala mo. When it comes to irrelevant relationship, yung dalawang elements doesn't have any relationship at all. Like in these photos, yung isa has a freedom of partying and drinking, while yung isa ay nag-express ng kanyang pinaglalaban freely. Both may indicate their freedom, but they do not have any exact relationship. As said earlier, in the process of cognitive dissonance, discomfort motivates change. Since may mga bagay na gusto nilang baguhin dahil sa certain discomfort na yun in which na bumabother sa isang tao. However, theory suggests na persuasion could occur since discomfort motivates change. And to be persuasive, strategies should focus on the inconsistencies while providing new behaviors that allow for consistency or balance. Aside from that, it offers some explanation for persuasion since it focuses on communication behavior, as people seek to persuade others, as people strive to reduce their dissonant cognition. For example, you're having a hesitation kung tutuloy ka ba sa lakad mo or not. So, to reduce that dissonance, you'll consult your friends or ask for their opinions, and from that, ipapersuade ka nila. As we discussed the theory, meron ding assumption on cognitive dissonance theory in which we will discuss one by one. First is human beings desire consistency in their beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. Sinasabi daw ng theory na people seek consistency in their beliefs and thoughts. There are times na na-encounter natin to, yung pagiging indecisive na hindi natin alam ano ba yung dapat nating sundin. Since ang dami pumapasok sa utak natin in which shows inconsistency. Second is dissonance is created by psychological inconsistencies. This pertains to the kind of consistency na kailangan natin as people. The theories that concerned with a strict logical consistency rather than sa mga cognitions na must be psychologically inconsistent with another para magkaroon ng cognitive dissonance. Third is dissonance is an aversive state that drives people to actions with measurable effects. This assumption suggests that when people experience psychological inconsistencies, the dissonance that is created is aversive, meaning sobrang uncomfortable para sa isang tao na maging under ng state of dissonance. And yung uncomfortability na yon ay can be felt by a person physically, so may tendency na mairita siya. Lastly, the dissonance motivates efforts to achieve consonance and efforts towards dissonance. It states that the arousal generated by dissonance will motivate people to avoid situations that could create inconsistencies. Since the theory is being developed, there are certain concepts that were refined and added as
Since the
first
theory is
concept
being
is the
developed,
magnitude of
there are
dissonance, in
certain
which refers
concepts
to
that
the
were refined
quantitative
and
amount
added
of dissonance a person
since the theory
experience,
is being
and ito
developed,
rin yung
there are
nagdedetermine ng
certain
action ng isang
concepts that
tao
were
na
refined
pwedeng
and added
makabawas sa
as
dissonance
well.
na
Since the
nafe-feel.
theory
Also, there are three factors that influence the magnitude of dissonance, which are importance, dissonance ratio, and rationality. First is importance, or how significant the issue is in which affects the degree of dissonance. Like for example, if a student is working and studying at the same time, the magnitude of dissonance is greater, especially if both are important to him. But if he is just a regular student, then the magnitude of dissonance will be less. Second is dissonance ratio, and which is a factor in determining magnitude of dissonance. It can be explained as simple as this. If you are in a relationship and you have more consonant cognitions such as I feel comfortable being with you or any positive thoughts, then your ratio is positive. But if you're saying the opposite tulad ng hindi ka na masaya or toxic na, then nagpapakita ka ng dissonant cognition, then ibig sabihin nun ay yung dissonance ratio mo is negative. Lastly is yung rationale, and this refers to the reasoning employed to explain why an inconsistency exists. For example, kung maraming nangyayari sa iyo in life, such as acad stress or family problems, then yun yung nagju-justify ng stress mo. Yung problems na yun ang nagkakos ng stress mo, in which can be referred as the rationale.
Experiencing cognitive dissonance is difficult, and to cope with it, we tend to do three things. Una, maaari nating ibahin ang ratio ng consonant at dissonant cognitions natin. Pangalawa, isipin at bawasan ang kahalagahan ng ating dissonant beliefs. At pangatlo, pag-iiba na lamang ng ating beliefs upang mawala ng tuluyan ng ating dissonance. We do these things to maintain consistency.
People engage in ways to change cognition and reduce the feeling of dissonance. Basically, we look for perceptual processes to fix our inconsistencies. Such processes are called selective exposure, selective attention, selective interpretation, and selective retention. Selective exposure is finding information that is aligned to one's attitude and behavior. For example, you hate saying things about someone yet want to vent how horrible someone is, so you look for a clique that shares the same feelings as you. Selective attention is focusing on information that conforms to one's belief while ignoring information that is inconsistent. For instance, viewing drug war only from how useful it was in reducing drug trade and ignoring its tragedies like the extrajudicial killings. Selective interpretation is understanding ambiguous information so that it becomes consistent. An example of this is when Heidelin Diaz was included in the government's drug matrix. The evidence was questionable, yet people just accepted her involvement. Selective retention is remembering selective information to obtain consistency in one's head. For example, a Marcos apologist viewing a headline as Martial Law, the Pick of Philippines, when in fact it is Martial Law, the Pick of Philippines Death. So as a conclusion, sabi nga nila Son at Lacrisi, pinipili at sinasala natin kung anong impormasyon ang titignan base sa mga dati na nating pinaniniwalaan. We do this to avoid dissonance and to somehow ease ourselves with consistency even when we trade the truth for it. Minimal justification. Ito naman yung pagbibigay lang ng pinakamaliit na amount para magbago ang isang tao. Now, this is famously called as the $1, $20 study. Cognitive consequences of forced compliance, an experiment by Leon Festinger and James Carl Smith, where participants from Stanford University were told to do the boring assignment of sorting spools into lots of 12 and giving square pegs a quarter turn to right. After an hour of this, the researcher told the participants that another person was needed for the work, and to fill this position, they must recruit a woman in the waiting room by telling her how enjoyable the task was. The participants were given either $1 or $20 each for recruiting the woman who was a researcher's assistant. The researcher's assistant reported that those who were given $1 endorsed the job enthusiastically, while those who received $20 stated that the task was boring. Basically, the effect was that the participants who received $1 did not have enough explanation to counteract the task of enthusiastically recruiting. Therefore, to achieve consistency, they needed to find a variable that could change. Hindi magbabago ang task, hindi mababago ang mababang bayad, kaya yung attitude na lang nila towards the task ang babaguhin nila. They advertise the task not as a task, but something they have to conform themselves in, but something they value. Just like what's happening in the working sectors, lower pay, higher work ethic. Minimal justification highlights a person's change of attitude instead of one's behavior, dahil ang behavior ng isang tao ay nagbabago lamang kapag may certain amount na naiaalok dito. People avoid dissonance when their decisions are reaffirmed or when the choice has already been made. Our decision making is heavily influenced by our fear of experiencing dissonance, kaya tayo naghahanap lagi ng assurance para mapanatag tayo sa mga desisyon natin. Buyer's remorse, a post-decision dissonance related to a purchase. Sa study ni Donnelly at Ivancevich, where they divided car buyers into two groups, one being notified about their car purchase after contract signing while the other was not, pinakita na ang cognitive dissonance ay nakakaapekto sa persuasion dahil karamihan ng buyers sa grupong hindi kinontak ay nag-back out sa order nila. People tend to have firmer stance on their choices when it is asserted to them. Knox and Inkster's post-decision dissonance at post-time experiment was about bettors in a horse racetrack who were asked about their confidence on their horses before and after they betted. The conclusion was that they were more confident about their picks after they had betted. This is a coping mechanism, patataasin ang paniniwala upang mawala ang pagkabahala. Of course, all theories have their criticisms. Feringer's cognitive dissonance theory is mainly critiqued by its utility and testability. Irving Janis and Robert Gilmore state that through biased scanning, a person can reduce inconsistency. Ang bias scanning ay nangyayari kapag motivated ang isang tao na mag-isip ng arguments na sumusuporta sa belief nito. Habang nag-iisip tayo, ayon kanila Janis at Gilmore, mas malaki ang tsansa na tanggapin natin ang ibang beliefs. Ayon kanila Cooper and Faggio, CDT contains a great deal of conceptual fuzziness. Sabi ni Elliot Aronson na ang pagsisinungaling ng mga Stanford students sa experiment ni Festinger and Carl Smith ay nangyari dahil ina-uphold nila ang pagiging totoo at hindi dahil sila ay binabayaran. Daryl Bem argues that it is not dissonance in cognitions that is operating but rather our self-perception. Ina-adjust natin ang pagbabago natin base sa kung ano yung sa tingin natin ay tama. Tulad na lang kapag nag-workout, ayaw nating mag-workout pero alam nating importante, kaya we do it. Ayon kanila Wokland at Brem, the cognitive dissonance theory is missing one thing: choice. If people have the choice about a dissonant relationship, they will change. If they don't have a choice, dissonance would not matter. They just wouldn't change. Ayon naman kanila Joel Cooper at Jeff Stone, malaki ang ginagampanan ng group membership sa pagpapababa ng dissonance ng isang tao, something that isn't mentioned in most CBT studies. According to some critics, ang CBT ay hindi nagbibigay ng buong pagpapaliwanag kung paano at kailan nagbabawas ng dissonance ang isang tao. Maraming paraan ng consonance ngunit hindi na pe-predict ng CBT kung ano sa mga ito ang gagamitin ng isang tao. We have different tolerance for dissonance, and the cognitive dissonance theory failed to factor this in. Dissonance motivates people to act. If they don't act, CDT can just explain that the dissonance was not strong enough. For this reason, it is difficult to disprove the theory through its testability. Stephen Littlejohn and Karen Floss state that Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory is one of the most significant theories in social psychology. It has contributed to our understanding of cognitions and its relationship to behaviors. As more critics and interpretations about this theory arise, the more it will yield rich theoretical insights that are helpful for research literature, informing studies in psychology, cognitive psychology, communication, and other related fields.
Thank you everyone for watching. This has been Sam Medina and Denise Garcia, and we hope that you've learned something from our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to post it on the question log that can be found in the Google Classroom. We'll be happy to answer it. Again, thank you very much.